Story by Robert McKee. This is one of the great classic books on screenwriting. It was first published in 1997 and has been a staple in every screenwriter's library since. The book is divided into 4 parts: the writer and the art of story, the elements of story, the principles of story design, and the writer at work. I'm only going to be covering 3 of these, and I'll just give you an overview of each. Part 1, the writer and the art of story. Story is about principles, not rules. A rule says we must do it this way or that way. A principle says this works and has through all remembered time. So a rule is dogmatic. A principle is more flexible. Story is about eternal universal forms, not formulas. There are a variety of story designs, but no prototype, no recipe book. In other words, no save the cat prototype. Story is about archetypes, not stereotypes. The archetypal story unearths a universally human experience. A stereotypical story confines itself to a narrow, cultural, specific experience. Story is about mastering the art, not second-guessing the marketplace. Hollywood's bombs are made with the same commercial calculation as its hits. Rather than agonizing over the odds, put your energies into achieving excellence. So don't follow the trends. Don't do what everybody else is doing. Do what you believe in. Part 2, the elements of story. Structure is a selection of events from the character's life stories that is composed into a strategic sequence to arouse specific emotions and to express a specific view of life. So yeah, screenplay structure, novel structure, whatever the structure may be, is basically a selection of events. And this character goes through each of these events or obstacles, however you want to put it, and comes out successfully or not. A story event creates meaningful change in the life situation of a character that is expressed and experienced in terms of a value. An event is caused by or affects people. So this event or obstacle is something that the character must go through and survive and even persevere. This makes the character stronger and it changes him or her. Story values are the universal qualities of human experience that may shift from positive to negative or negative to positive from one moment to the next. To make meaningful change, you must express it, and the audience must react to it in terms of value. A scene is an action through conflict that turns the value-charged condition of a character's life on at least one value with a degree of perceptible significance. Ideally, every scene is a story event. So look at the scene you've written and ask yourself, what value is at stake in my character's life at this moment? Is it love? Is it truth? Basically, there are only 40 to 60 scenes per movie. I saw somewhere that David Lynch says there are 70. So, something like that. Now, a beat is an exchange of behavior in action or reaction. The beat is the smallest element of structure, and this beat is not to be confused with the beat that indicates a short pause. So this beat that we're talking about is just behavior. It's the action-reaction part of behavior. Now, a sequence is a series of scenes, 2 to 5 actually, that culminates with greater impact than any previous scene. So you have rising conflict, and these scenes go together in this sequence. You know, there's action, reaction, and maybe there's more action that causes more reactions into the next sequence. McKee says to title each sequence to make clear to yourself why it's in the film. So title these, you know, like probably on note cards or something like that. Make sure that you keep track of them. An act is a series of sequences that peaks in a climactic scene which causes a major reversal of values. It's more powerful in its impact than any previous sequence or scene. A series of acts builds the story. A story is simply one huge master event. So yeah, most stories have 3 acts. And you go from Act 1 to Act 2 to Act 3, usually with what's called a plot point, or something major happens to, you know, take you from one act to the next. Now, this, you could say, is like another catalyst. And you could say it's even bigger than a catalyst, but it's a way of sectioning off the acts. Speaking of story climax, a story is a series of acts that build to a last act climax, or story climax, which brings about absolute and irreversible change. Beats build scenes, scenes build sequences, sequences build acts, acts build the story to its climax. Basically, everything in a screenplay should be leading towards the story climax. Plot. The internally consistent, interrelated pattern of events that move through time to shape and design a story. There are 3 types of plot: the arc plot, the mini plot, and the anti-plot. The arc plot is the classical design. The mini plot is minimalism. The anti-plot is anti-structure. McKee shows these with his story triangle on page 45. Now, there are differences within the story triangle. The arc plot delivers a closed ending. All questions raised by the story are answered. The audience is left satisfied. This, you could say, is most popular films. The mini plot leaves the ending somewhat open. Most of the emotion evoked by the film will be satisfied, but an emotional residue may be left for the audience to satisfy. So the audience can decide for themselves what happened at the end, and they're not really being told how to feel. They feel it for themselves. The anti-plot is less common, and it contradicts traditional forms to exploit or even ridicule the very idea of formal principles. This is the experimental film and films that really just don't care about traditional plot. In Chapter 4, McKee lists the various genres. It's on pages 80 to 86. I'll just read through some of these right now. So you have the love story, the horror film, the modern epic, the western, war genre, and you have comedy, crime, social drama, and so forth. McKee says you must not only respect, but also you must master your genre and its conventions. You have to study the form, read everything in that genre, watch the movies, and study them. Now, in terms of structure and character, structure is character. Character is structure. They're the same thing. True character is revealed in the choices a human being makes under pressure. The greater the pressure, the deeper the revelation, the truer the choice to the character's essential nature. Pressure is essential. Choices made when nothing is at risk mean very little. The finest writing not only reveals true character, but arcs or changes over the course of the telling. Every main character, at least, needs some kind of arc, because if the character doesn't change, then you could say that character is somewhat flat, even boring. The function of structure is to provide progressively building pressures that force characters into more and more difficult dilemmas, where they must make more and more difficult risk-taking choices and actions, gradually revealing their true natures. Even in real life, when there's a death in the family or something like that, you cope. You find a strength that you didn't know was there. Now on to premise and theme. A premise is the idea that inspires the story. It's an open-ended question, like what would happen if... Now the theme or controlling idea is the story's central idea. The controlling idea must be expressible in a single sentence. Shape your story around one clear idea. This idea could be anything. It's like one of those life things. Like greed is bad, and then you prove it. It's the theme of what the story is about. It connects everything in the story. Part 3, the principles of story design. This section starts with the protagonist. McKee says the protagonist is a willful being. He or she has willpower. The protagonist has a conscious desire. The protagonist has a need or a goal, an object of desire, and knows it. The protagonist has the capacities to pursue the object of desire convincingly. He needs a believable combination of qualities in the right balance to pursue his desires. The protagonist has the will and capacity to pursue the object of his desire to the human limit. So he goes all the way with this. And this human limit is established by setting and genre. There is no middle ground. The inciting incident upsets the protagonist's status quo world. The protagonist responds to the sudden positive or negative change. So the protagonist is going along in their regular happy little world until something comes along and changes it. Some catalyst. And then that protagonist has to react to this catalyst. The inciting incident, at first, throws the protagonist's life out of balance. And then it arouses in him the desire to restore that balance. The inciting incident usually occurs within the first 30 minutes of the screenplay, but I suggest that it occur by page 10, because let's say you have the inciting incident early on, and then you have your plot point at the 30-minute mark, which sets off the, you could say, another catalyst into Act 2. Acts are the macro structure of the story. In feature films, novels, and plays, 3 acts is the minimum. Now, 3 major reversals are the necessary minimum for a full-length work of narrative art. Within the main plot, there's the subplot. Subplots have their own structure too. It has its own inciting incident, and so forth. So these major reveals, they are necessary because they are different catalysts that force the character into more reactions and more changes. Now on page 317, McKee goes into the principle of antagonism. And here, a protagonist and his story can only be as intellectually fascinating and emotionally compelling as the forces of antagonism make them. The forces of antagonism are the sum total of all forces that oppose the character's will and desire. It doesn't refer to a specific antagonist or villain. The forces of antagonism could be the weather. It could be like tornadoes. It could be a flood. It could be almost anything. Now in chapter 17, McKee goes into character. He says, a character is a work of art, a metaphor for human nature. We relate to characters as if they were real, but they are superior to reality. Character design begins with an arrangement of two primary aspects, characterization and true character. Characterization is the sum of all the observable qualities like physical appearance, IQ, occupation, and so forth. True character can only be expressed through choice and dilemma. How a person chooses to act under pressure is who he is. So characterization is just a description of the character. And true character comes out when they are faced with an obstacle and must react. Now, I'm going to stop here because if I don't, I will keep talking and talking and talking, and this video will never end. So I suggest that you read this book if you're interested in screenwriting. Like I said, it was written in 1997, so there's going to be outdated examples, but I still suggest going to some of those and looking up what he's talking about, or even watch some of the films. Anyway, I hope that helped you, and good luck with your journey. Talk to you later. Bye.